Hello there, Michelle Short here for My Favourite Things. Today I have a nighttime scene card to share with you, so let's get started. I'm taking the To the Rescue stamp set and I'm going to stamp out one of these super cute dogs, these kind of super dogs really. There's a super cat in there as well, a couple of super cats. I'm going to stamp out that dog and then also the clouds. I stamped the clouds once to start with and then ended up stamping them again, so I had 4, and then in the end I actually needed an extra one. And right at the beginning I wasn't even sure if I would need the clouds at all in the first place. So sometimes it is quite helpful to stamp extra elements in case you might need them. So I'm inking up the images with extreme black ink and stamping them down onto some smooth white cardstock. I didn't get a great impression the first time, so I am going to double stamp that just so that I get a really nice dark crisp line. So making sure to ink those up really well, and then I can stamp those down. And like I said, I do end up stamping another 2 clouds, and then later on I decide that I want an extra one, so I do then stamp and colour that a little bit later. So I'm going to colour my images with Copic markers here, and I'm starting off with my darkest shade, kind of mapping in where I think the shadows would be, and then I go towards the lighter colours. So all of the colours that I'm using, I've left the caps on screen so that you can see what I'm using. This is probably one of my favourite brown colour combinations. I really like the E50 numbers and they're quite a nice kind of a rich brown. So I'm just going in all of the different areas there, and then I can blend out with the E57. So I started off with E59, kind of blending out the area slightly. I did think originally that the top part of his kind of where his mouth and nose is would probably be lighter, but I decided just to colour it in the darker colours and I like how it turned out. I'm then going in with E55 and I'm just going to blend those 2 darkest colours and then blend this out to the lightest shade. I originally thought maybe I'd add a lighter shade on top, but I decided I didn't really need to. I'm just going to add the lighter shades to his belly. And then for his eye mask and cape, I'm going to use some red shades. And again, this is one of my favourite red colour combinations. It's kind of goes a little bit corally in colour, kind of like a little bit pink, but I do really like it. I think it gives quite nice depth and all of these shades do work really nicely together. So I'm adding in the colour so that the lightest shades are kind of at the top, but because that cape kind of overlaps each other, that bit at the bottom I do want some darkness to be at the top, so it kind of looks like the top part is overlapping and it would create a shadow. So now I can go in with my lighter shades here in this colour combination. And I didn't add the lightest shade to the eye mask. It's quite a small area, so I didn't think it needed it. And then I can finish off with my lightest shade, which is the R32. And this definitely is more of a corally shade, but along with those darker reds, I think it works quite nicely. And then for his nose, I'm using E49. So then for the clouds, I wanted to colour them with aquatones. I do quite like colouring clouds with aquatones. This is more of like a night sky that I'm going for, so actually the clouds in real life would be probably quite a bit darker, but I quite like these aquas and I don't think it really matters. I think it works quite nicely on the finished card. And I do go in with a colourless blender just to kind of blend those lightest shades together. I'm then going to cut out the images, so I've taken the To the Rescue Die-namics set. I've placed the dies over the images, held them down with some low tack tape and run those through my die cutting machine. So that's the little super pup there, he's so cute. And then I've got those clouds and I am going to run that panel back through my die cutting machine for the other 2 clouds. Next, I want to work on my background, so I've taken a panel of white cardstock cut to 4 3/4 inches by 3.5 inches, and I'm going to add some Distress Oxide inks on top. So I'm starting off with Blueprint Sketch. I then go in with Chip Sapphire and Villainous Potion. I do quite like to add some purple to my night skies. It doesn't really make them purple as such, but it just gives a really nice kind of colour mixed in with those blues. And then I'm going in with Black Soot Distress ink at the top just to darken that slightly. Just blending all of those colours together, and then once I'm happy, I want to add some stars on top. So I'm taking Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof white paint, and on a small piece of craft sheet here, I'm just mixing that with a little bit of water to loosen it slightly, and then I'm going to splatter that onto the panel. The first few drops were a little bit larger in size than I wanted, so I did try and remove some of that paint from the brush. As I go along, the less and less paint that is on the brush, the smaller the droplets, but to start with they were a little bit bigger than I wanted to, but my sentiment is pretty much going to cover that area anyway. It's always difficult with splatter because sometimes it looks more like snow rather than stars, but I do quite like having the kind of bright white stars in the sky. I've then taken the Outside the Box Cityscape Die-namics, and I have cut them from some black licorice cardstock. So this set does work with the Outside the Box Die-namics, but I'm just going to cut the edges off, and I'm going to use it just as a general die rather than using it as kind of like a box design. So I've cut those two edges off, and it does cut out the windows of the buildings, and I wanted it to kind of look like there was some lights on in the buildings. So I've taken some lemon drop cardstock, and I'm using the black layer here as a guide, and I'm going to draw around it with a pencil, and then I can cut that out. I could just add some pieces of the yellow cardstock behind, but I thought in my head this was an easier way to do it. I'm still not 100% sure if it is the easiest way to do it, but it worked okay for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out with some scissors. It doesn't need to be precise because it's going to go behind that black die cut and you're not really going to see it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut inside of the pencil lines because I do want it to be a little bit smaller than the black die cut. So just using my scissors here, and like I said, it doesn't really matter if it's neat or anything like that because you're not going to see it. I just don't want to cut too far into it because otherwise you're going to kind of see that through the windows. So just going along all of these different areas of the buildings here. And then I can just cut that down at the edge, and then I'm just going to place that behind the black die cut. I apologise that I'm slightly off screen here, but I just want to make sure that they are kind of fitting together okay. I did end up having to cut it down a little bit further, just mainly at the tops of those buildings, so I can just go back in with my scissors and just cut those down. As I was doing this, I felt that the yellow was a little bit too bright, and the best way for me to kind of dull any cardstock or anything like that is with vellum. So I decided to use the heavyweight vellum today. I could have used just the translucent vellum, and actually I possibly think it might have been better, but I wasn't sure, and so I went with the heavyweight vellum. So you don't really see a huge amount of the yellow through it, but it does just kind of give that glow, which is really what I wanted. I tried it with the vellum on its own, and it was just like a white light, which is absolutely fine, but I wanted it to be more of a kind of yellowy glow, but just not as bright as the lemon drop cardstock. So both of these together I think worked out quite nicely. So I just added some glue onto the back of the Cityscape die cut, and then I just placed the vellum on top, and then I can add some more glue and then place the lemon drop piece behind. And then I did that for the other cityscape as well, so that I can layer them both on top of each other. So I've got my panel here that's all dry, and I'm just placing the pieces down so that I can see exactly where I want them to be placed before I stick anything down. So just working out here kind of how far I want the buildings to be kind of up or down, and I decided that I wanted it probably further down, and where I'm going to place the dog and then where I'm going to place the clouds. This did take me a little while. Obviously I've sped it up on camera, but it did take me some time. But once I figured it out, I'm then adding some on-point precision glue onto the back of the clouds to start with. And I'm adding a few of them kind of off the edge. I find that this works quite well to kind of show that the scene is actually bigger than what you have cut it down to be. Obviously the sky extends everywhere, and so I wanted to show that. So it's quite nice to have things hanging off the edge. I am going to cut those extra bits of the clouds off though. So just popping those clouds down to start with. I'm then adding some more of the glue onto the back of the first lot of buildings here. I'm just going to kind of place that down lightly to start with, and then bring in the buildings that are going to go on top so that I can see if this one is far enough down or far enough up. And it pretty much was in the right place. So once I'm happy, I'm going to press that down. And then because that piece is pretty much like 3 layers of cardstock high, I wanted to make sure that the piece that I add on top still has some kind of stability at the bottom. So I just added a piece of thin foam tape, and then I can remove the backings, and then I can add some more glue onto the back of this piece here. The first lot of buildings was cut a little bit narrow on either side, but once this piece goes on top, it's going to cover that. So just making sure that that's lined up properly, and then I can press that down. I'm then adding Super Pup on top. I decided to make him 2 die cuts thick because how I'm adding him is going to be, some of him is going to be over the first lot of buildings, some of him is going to be over the second lot of buildings, and some of him is going to be over the actual sky itself. So I added little kind of dots of foam tape, some of them thin foam tape, some of them like normal thickness, and then some of it glue. So that's why I felt like I wanted him to be 2 die cuts thick, so that he's got a little bit more stability to him. Just in case I post this card in the mail, I don't want it to get crushed on the way. So just placing him down, and he looks like he's flying in the sky, just about to rescue someone. I just think he's so cute. And then I can cut off those excess pieces of the clouds. I've then added some thin foam tape onto the back of the sentiment. That was stamped onto black licorice cardstock using Versamark ink, and then I added some white embossing powder and heat set that and cut that down into a strip. I'm then adding some tape runner onto the back of the panel, and then I'm going to pop that down onto an A2 size white card base. So that's a finished size of 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. Just placing it down initially to start with, making sure that that's where I want it to be, and then I'm just using some scrap paper just to help me press that down. I don't want to get any of my fingerprints into the distress ink. And then to finish off, I'm just adding a couple of white highlights just onto that Super Pup there. And that is the card finished for today. Quite a lot of dimension, even though it's not kind of really built up with lots of foam tape. There is quite a lot of dimension just in general, with those buildings being a little bit thicker with the cardstock behind. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.